What's up, my pal?
How are you?
My man, how you doing?
It's great to see you.
You too, kiddo. Where you at? You're at home?
No, I have an office about 10 minutes walk from home.
All right. Well, listen, before we start or do anything, our mutual pal Dan DeLuca, the music critic here in
Yeah,
Philadelphia,
yeah.
he said to say hello. He said to send you his love, and then he has a message. I'm just gonna read this.
Okay.
It says, "What the fuck is wrong with Arsenal?" I don't know. I'm just a messenger on that one. But is there anything you want to pass back to him on that?
Maybe he and I should have a Zoom call and I can talk him through the last 10 years of underinvestment and disaster.
Underinvestment and disaster. That's what those are the two words I'll pass back
but
to
it's
him.
very complicated.
All right. Listen, I'm just the messenger.
Yeah.
Listen.
Are you at home, Adam?
Yeah, I'm in Philly. I'm in South Philly right now. I'm 3 blocks away from the famous Pat's and Gino's cheesesteak places. This is where I live.
Hey.
This is my music room, and you can't see it, but it's also my library. You've shown me your library, but I have all my books behind the camera.
Oh, okay, cool.
And now I get to add this to my library. This fantastic new novel.
Oh, thank you.
Just Like You. We're going to talk about it in a minute. I have a lot of questions, and we're very excited. You have a lot of fans here in Philadelphia. I don't know if you know that.
Well, I've been before and people showed up.
Well, what's the deal? Like you seem to have a somewhat of an affinity for our city. I know you've collaborated with our pals Marat.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's just some sort of click between you and Philly. Like, how did that come about?
Well, I think Dan DeLuca is the cause of a lot of it. I think the first time I came to Philly, Dan interviewed me and we went out for a drink and we went to see music and he introduced me to the music of Marat. And I think you have very good NPR, right, in Philly.
Absolutely.
There's a nice lady.
Terry Gross?
Well, I did Terry Gross a couple of times. Yeah.
I did Terry
Gross from London before High Fidelity was published in the US. And the first time I ever went on book tour, the number of people who said they only came because they heard me talking to Terry Gross, she saved my life, because when I say the number of people, it was like 5 in every city.
Yeah, but that's a start, you know?
It's a start.
You and me, we got the same thing. I mean, back in 2011, Fresh Air with Terry Gross reviewed my first album, right? And I was a teacher and working full time. I was playing 10 gigs a year. And that put me on the map.
Is that what happened? Where were you teaching?
I was living in Spanish Harlem in New York City, and I had given up on my music career. You know, I had turned 30, and my friend offered me a teaching job at his company, and I was working as a teacher. I was teaching English, history, standardized test tutoring, homeschooling. I was teaching piano lessons at night. You know, I was just moving into that phase of my life where I was going to be a weekend warrior with music, you know?
Yeah.
And,
so you and me both, because I did exactly those jobs when I was 30.
Really?
Yeah.
And how did, like, when did it pop? Was it Fever Pitch?
Yeah. Fever Pitch in 1992 when I was 35. Yeah.
Me too. I mean, that's about at age 35 is when Barack Obama put my song on his playlist. And that was when
That's a turning point.
I quit my last day job that year. Do you think that some measure of success coming a little later made you approach the craft of writing differently? Do you know?
I don't know about approaching it differently. I do know that I was really blocked up, you know, I mean, it was a dam. It was a dam that burst. It was 10, 12 years of trying and not getting anywhere. And finally, when it did come down, I, you know, I had a torrent of stuff I wanted to do and say, and I think that probably helped. And then also a kind of what the fuck, you know, like why not go for it? Why not be cheeky? Why not try stuff? Because
Yeah.
nothing else is working. So my voice was quite clear, I think, when I
Yeah.
was 35.
Yeah. Your voice was there right from Fever Pitch. It's like, and it's been so consistent through all your writing. I wanted to ask you, before we get into talking about Just Like You.
Yeah, I'll talk about anything, by the way. I'm happy.
Sure.
Music, books, whatever.
Well, so I loved this book for a lot of reasons, but the thing I loved most about it for me is I've been doing a lot of reading, like a lot of people during quarantine,
Yeah.
and my reading habits have changed, and the books I've been reading have been a bit different than I would when I'm traveling on the road. Um, and this was sort of like a breath of fresh air because it's it's light and breezy, and it's easy to like these characters. And I've been like diving into the muck of very dark literature and heavy historical nonfiction. And I'm just wondering, have your reading habits changed, or writing habits changed during quarantine at all?
Um, Reading habits, definitely. It became harder to read for a while. The first, our first lockdown, I was kind of, you know, edgy, and I couldn't settle. I couldn't read books that were slow. I couldn't read books that were dark. Um, and I found a couple of things that really switched it round for me. And they weren't,
Like what?
well, do you know have you ever read Kevin Wilson?
No, I
Um,
haven't.
okay, he wrote a novel called The Family Fang, which I loved, which is about the children of performance artists. And it's really funny. But this year he wrote a book called Nothing to See Here. And it's so easy to read again, and it's about stuff. And it's about this young woman who goes to look after, complicated reasons, goes to look after a couple of kids as a nanny. And everyone keeps saying, yeah, well, you know, it's a tough gig. I hope you'll be all right. And she doesn't know what's the deal with these kids. And these kids are perfectly normal, perfectly nice, slightly difficult childhood, divorced parents. But the one thing they have is that they burst into flames at inappropriate moments. It's just a fantastic setup. They don't do any harm to themselves, but when they get steamed up, they literally go on fire and start setting everything alight around them. And that's what this girl's having to deal with. It's such a great book, I can't tell you.
Nothing to See Here.
Nothing to See Here. And then a 1930s novel by an old English writer called R.C. Sheriff. And it's a book about 2 weeks holiday in an English seaside town, family of 5. Everything that is completely what they do every year. And it's like a minute by minute. It's kind of cosmic. It's a bit like early Nicholson Baker books, actually. These people don't get off the train till about page 120.
Wow.
And you're never bored. The observation, the getting to know the characters, the kind of almost pathetic hope and joy that they take in this 2-week break from their grind. It's, again, very beautiful book, and I raced through it. But there was some stuff I just didn't want to look at or go anywhere near. And I think we have to listen to our souls and our bodies at this time. I want to keep reading, but if you don't feel like being drawn to the dark stuff, I think that's completely fine. And a lot of books are dark, a lot of movies are dark, a lot of TV is dark.
You know, it's funny, like I like to watch a lot of heavy old movies,
Yeah,
Criterion films,
yeah, yeah.
old Italian directors and German films, whatever. And I've been watching a lot of Eddie Murphy and Steve Martin and Richard Pryor during this year because, God damn it, you just need to laugh sometimes.
You need to laugh, and I keep going back to 40s and 50s stuff. Preston Sturges
Yeah,
and Cary Grant movies. They've been a lot of joy in this time.
sure. I dug
Yeah,
out. Yeah,
I wanted to say that I started just like you when things were really gloomy here, but that was the referendum. We didn't know what was coming. And one thing I knew when I started it was that I wanted to write a book that was optimistic. I wanted to write a book about how people can make connections at a time when it seems like one half of the country is never going to talk to the other half again.
sure.
And so I started knowing that it would end in as good a place as I could manage realistically for the people that I was writing about. And that was, it was a task I set myself, particularly because there's so much dystopia as well. And like my teenage kids are being asked to read dystopia all the time. And I want to shout at the exam people and the teachers, just look out of the window.
Just look at, yeah.
They don't want to deal with this stuff.
Yeah.
Forget about The Handmaid's Tale, just for the moment.
Yeah. I hear you. It's funny because when I was reading this, like I have toured the UK so many times and have so many friends. And I've spent time over there before, during, and after the referendum. But I gotta be honest with you, Nick, like I don't get it, man. Like we watch your news with some distance,
Yeah.
And we have our own bullshit to deal with. And
I hadn't heard about that. What's been going on there?
And like I always ask a lot of questions of people when I go over the UK because I follow politics pretty closely.
Yeah.
But I got to be honest with you, even 4 years later, I still, as an American, I still don't have like a full grasp of like what the fuck went down in the UK in the last 4 years. But I appreciated with your book that I really didn't learn anything new about Brexit, and I didn't want to, but I certainly enjoyed spending time with people that felt very real. It felt very nuanced, and I was wondering if being a parent, like spending time with your teenage sons, did that help you have that perspective of sort of the complexity and of these issues and sort of the human element to it? Because the character of Joseph you've written so beautifully, and his feelings about Brexit and the referendum are surprising. They're surprising.
My kids know, not particularly. They were just outraged by the whole thing, and it's the kids you feel sorriest for because they've got to deal with the world that we have now provided them with, and they didn't get a say in it at all. Even though like 16, 17, they now can't go to work in Europe, and we're going to be much worse off than we were, and all that kind of thing. So they were just furious. One of the things that set me off on the path and to try and find some nuance is that I started to get really pissed off with my own team. I voted to remain, of course, but there was a kind of smugness and arrogance and unkindness from my own team afterwards that I thought, well, I'm not sure this is going to help us any, because you're writing off 17.4 million people or whatever it was that voted, and they all did it for different reasons. And the reasons were not that they're stupid or that they've been lied to. There's something else going on here. And until we understand what that was and what the question was that they heard, then we're not going to be able to ever to move forward. And I started to think about your 2016 and our 2016 in the same way, which was that people were asked to vote, it seemed to me, on the question, are you happy?
Sure.
And, you know, in our country, even the language was kind of undynamic. You either remain, like, just stay as you are, we're happy,
things are cool,
or you want to move. And
sure.
for most people, things are not good. So even though maybe they answered the wrong question in the wrong way, what they heard was, I want to change. I want something different. I have an analogy. My oldest son, my 27-year-old, is he has autism, and you know, quite severe autism. And when he was younger, there was a scare in America and in England about the MMR vaccinations and whether this was causing autism. And for the first time, parents of autistic kids were having microphones thrust under their noses, and people were saying to them, do you think the vaccine caused your son or daughter's condition? And I think most autistic parents knew that it hadn't. But if you say, no, it didn't, the microphone goes away and
Sure.
and people stop listening. So a lot of people going, I don't know, could be, because then you get heard more. And with Brexit, I think people thought, if I just vote to stay in the European Union, then my life does not get acknowledged. The condition of my life, the unemployment, the way things have gone over the last 10 years with globalization, people are going to stop listening. And I guess the same was true to a certain extent in the US as well.
Sure. And there's, you know, at least it seems like when you're describing that question, are you happy? Vote, are you happy? Up or down? It changes the dynamics of what is conservative versus liberal, right?
Yeah.
And it really kind of shakes the Etch-a-Sketch up, because in a way, suddenly, you know, traditionally, at least, you know, the fundamental definition of conservatism is, yeah, we want to keep things as they are, you know.
Yeah, so we were the conservatives.
In a way, but I thought you did this very nuanced thing where you have a young Black man at age 22. He's 22 at the time of the referendum, who enters into, you know, a romantic relationship with a middle-aged white English teacher.
Yeah.
Also a parent. And the things that we learn about them, their background, their opinions on things, there's so much more nuance than we usually see presented to us. The thing that I really appreciated about the book that really resonated with me, having traveled this country in the US for the last 4 years. And remember, Nick, I have a fairly diverse fan base. People who are urban, rural, Black, white, conservative, liberal. You know, it's a very interesting group of people. And depending on where I'm playing, the dynamics will be different, right? So I try to talk to people, and I have learned that, you know, that when we look at people on the surface, we look at how they dress, we look at where they're from, we look at the music they listen to, we look at their social media, and we, more than ever, we make snap judgments about what we think they think about politics and race. And we, it's very discouraging that we're sort of at a peak level of judgment, you know, in the culture. Was that something, was that sort of a motivation for you with this particular book?
Yeah, like I'm saying, you know, the people I knew were being judgmental, and they were people I liked and people who thought the same as me, and I found myself not thinking the same as them because of their levels of judgmentalism, and you know, they just lump a load of things in with being a Brexiteer or whatever the word is, that I don't think are actually there, and it was a very complicated thing, and disastrous outcomes will be the result.
Sure.
but it was complicated.
Sure. I mean, I think your dialogue, as always, is fantastic in this book, but especially for the younger set of Joseph, his friends, all these kids. How do you keep an ear to how people are talking? Like you've been writing now for a few decades.
Yeah.
How do you keep your ear to the ground about, because you usually write contemporary, not always, but you
Yeah.
usually do write for the now. How do you keep your ear tuned to the street, like what people are talking?
Well, I mean, the first thing is I'm very careful about the street in terms of slang. It moves really, really fast, and I think it's maybe a mistake to try and include words that won't even be relevant by the time the book is published, let alone in a year or two's time. So I tend to concentrate on the core of their language rather than the frills, if you see what I mean. And when you get down to that, then I think that young people have not changed so much over the decades. They tend to shoot from the hip more than adults do. And I like that, you know, they can make things happen more in dialogue because they say what's on their mind. They misunderstand maybe more than adults do about certain things, which can be fun. And every now and again, I go towards something contemporary. My son and a couple of his friends were helpful in that regard.
Do they ever say, Dad, you got to cut that shit out? People don't say that shit no more.
The great thing about having sons is that they never read it anyway. So seriously, I don't know when my sons will ever read one of my books.
Well,
so they're happy to do the help, but they're not so happy to read through afterwards.
I mean, look, it makes sense. Like at a certain age, whatever your parents do, you got to do the opposite. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, we are a house of books, and yeah, they don't like that much. But I don't know about you, but the reason I'm a reader and have always been a reader, I mean, a lot of it was to do with having nothing much going on when I was a teenager. I mean, there weren't that many choices, and books were like easily the best choice available to me. Whereas now, you would have to say that books maybe are only one of the good choices available to you. I mean, you know, movies. We watch movies, like you're saying, all through the pandemic. But when I was a kid, we had 3 TV channels, sure. And I lived in a town 30 miles from London, so like the movies that opened in London would arrive about a year later. I had to go to London if I wanted to see one. Yeah, I mean, I ended up reading a lot. The TV was bad. I had my music and I had my books, and you can read and listen to music at the same time.
But reading is an escape from a screen. It's an escape from looking at a phone or a laptop or a screen. And yeah. I will tell you, because we have a lot of viewers on this show that I do who are young, and we have a lot of parents that watch this show with their kids. I do a lot of meet and greets with these families, and I'm astounded.
Hi, parents and kids.
I'm astounded that these young kids are starting to read.
Yeah.
Like pandemic has given people a new appreciation for books.
Well, pandemic maybe is a version of my teenage years. It's like, oh, not this again. I'm gonna escape into my bedroom and read a book, yeah, which is great for all of us.
Sure. So I'm curious. You've showed me your music collection or your vinyl collection.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could sit here for 3 hours and talk to you about music and how music influences your writing and your reading. But let me start by just asking, because you said your kids aren't big readers at the moment. I know where your tastes in music tend to run. and they align with mine very much so. What do your kids listen to, and do they like any of the music that you like?
Yes, they do. My 18-year-old is kind of an indie fan now. He listens to a bit of hip hop, but he's a Ben Folds obsessive, and that's entirely through me.
Sure.
But kind of a completist and knows every word to every song. And there's a few indie bands, guitar bands that he listens to. The younger one is very much hip hop, but when he was really little, he loved very basic rock and roll. Like garage rock from the 60s. He just used to punch his little fist along to this stuff, or sometimes the Ramones, and there's still that bass there underneath it, where basic, direct, great rock and roll still speaks to him. And he was talking the other day about how much he loved the band's version of Slipping and Sliding.
Sure.
And stuff like that. But it's really important to both of them.
Is there any hip hop or pop or whatever that your kids or their friends have turned you on to, like new music that you've dug recently? I know you mentioned Kendrick Lamar in the book, which I thought was cool.
I don't know if I would have fallen so hard for these Taylor Swift albums this year if it hadn't been for them. They're going, these records are really good, Dad, or whatever they say. Yeah, albums. And I have to say, I think they're amazing records. Have you heard them?
I have. It's a step. It's the first things that she's put out where I said, okay, like talent. She's always been talented, but she really grew. She really grew with these releases for sure.
Yeah. So I got that from them. Anderson .Paak, maybe. Sure. A few things. Yeah.
You think you'll ever do another volume of the songbook / 31 songs type? Would you ever do another piece like that?
Yeah, I would love to do that. I mean, I've discovered so much music since I wrote it, and I got more things to say about it. The big thing that's happened to me over the last 5 years is jazz, I guess, and
really?
It never happened for me before. And one of the things that occurred to me is that Spotify, etc., we know how bad it is for the artists, but
really, I hadn't heard about that.
I can see you with your big piano and all the stuff that Spotify's paid for.
No, actually, I have to say, we joke. First of all, my career changed because of Spotify, because Barack Obama put us on his Spotify playlist.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And actually, I will tell you, as I travel the world, and when I typically travel the world, up till recently, I usually get to spend time with people and say, how did you hear about us? Or how do you hear about music in general? And I've come to really understand that Spotify and the streaming platforms, whatever kind of curation they use, whether I like it or not, or whether it works for me, it's how they're finding my music and other music. It's what radio was for us.
Yeah.
And so we started to get fans in their 20s over the last few years, quite a lot. College age kids that got on board with us in the last 4 or 5 years. And so not only have I accepted it, but I'm for it. I think we could do it better. I think we should do it better.
Yeah.
But I think it is actually now good for music and musicians in the big picture.
In the big picture, and as long as, of course, people can go out and buy tickets for a show. If they can't buy tickets for a show, it's not so great.
As we learned this year.
As you learned, yeah. But what I was going to say about Spotify is that once I started to teach myself about jazz, then I listened in a way that I could never possibly have listened in previous years, because I had the history of music in my pocket. And
Sure.
I listened to a classic jazz album every day for about 18 months, I guess. You know, I
Wow.
just heard everything. And if you have to pay £20 for it, I mean, you're just not going to do it 7 days a week. And it's made me think a lot about the advantages that we all have in terms of access to great stuff. But just recently, I've been reading everyone's records of the year list, and I've found like a bunch of stuff, a tidal wave of amazing new music. And then I started to think how sad it is that I will never have a relationship with those records in the way that I had in the 70s and 80s.
Sure.
Where you know every note of something. I don't, there's so much music that I listen and think, yeah, that's great. And that's kind of as far as it goes, because then I'm listening to the next thing that's great.
You know, it's like one of the things I appreciated about the 31 songs piece is you talk about how songs bind themselves to moments in your life, and it's kind of has this almost olfactory sense memory aspect. You remember where you were, and these songs travel with you through life. And one of the things that I think about is I'm from a different generation than you, but like your generation, you know, we grew up going out to concerts and shows and clubs, and music was a public social endeavor. And then we also had our private listening, but it was a second thing after the bedroom listening was below the social listening.
Mm-hmm.
And now what's in fashion is bedroom pop, as they call it, and all these sound, and it's very much because most of the listening that people are doing and young people are doing is by themselves with earbuds at home, or you know, on the bus or whatever. It's much less physically social. It's not out in the club listening, right? So you and I like old rock and roll records and old funk records and you know, all this music that recalls youth and the socialization and makeout parties and all, you know, whatever the hell we did. But the younger generation is having a different experience with listening.
Yeah.
I hope actually in the future, when we're through the pandemic era, maybe in a year or two, maybe there will be this new appreciation for live music and
I think people are desperate. You know, I think I've been to a couple of gigs in the last couple of months, like in between lockdowns and things, and I was just sitting there or standing there thinking, why wasn't I going 7 nights a week? You know, why did I only go once a month? That was insane. These people make this music for me, and I just watch TV most of the nights when I could have gone somewhere. And I feel like I'm never going to make that mistake again.
Listen, I hope you're right, because it's my bread and butter and it's what I live to do. You know, over the summer, we went to Virginia and we did this show, Tough Cookies, outside in the street in a neighborhood so that everybody could be socially distanced and masked and shit. But we rolled a piano into the middle of the street. That's the only way we could figure out how to do it. And people went bananas. I mean, these little kids were running around and the parents were going ape shit over this music. And I thought, God, it's just like a little street party. It's not a big, it ain't no big shakes, but you know, a little street party is kind of a profound thing during these times, you know?
Yeah, well, I live right, as you know, I live right on a park. And recently we've had buskers kind of outside our house, but then you listen and you think, whoa, these people are not buskers. They're like musicians, you know. There's a fiddle player who's like beautiful. And then a trumpet, they've got a trumpet there, and they're all like jazz trained or classically trained, and they've just gone out there to play and to maybe earn a little bit while they're doing it because there's nothing else. And again, everyone just gathers round because it's inspirational at those moments.
So Nick, I wanted to ask you, because you included me, which I really appreciated in this project that you did last year, this auction,
Yeah.
set list auction, for your organization, Ministry of Stories.
Mm.
We on the Tough Cookies on this show, we have a lot of organizations that we support and that we promote, and we have a lot of people watching this show who have really started to dedicate themselves to not just philanthropic endeavors in general, but it's specifically education, right? Like we associate this show with an organization called Apple Farm, which is a nonprofit, which is arts education for kids here in this area. Could you, in a paragraph, just tell people who are watching now, what is Ministry of Stories, and how does it work, and what's the intention with it?
Well, we copied my friend Dave Egger's idea, which was the 826 schools in America. And the idea is that kids who need help with their writing, or just want to write, or given the inspiration for writing, they can go to a place, and they will meet usually youngish adults who are not teachers, but might be writers, might be cartoonists, might be any kind of artist, who will sit them down and say, what do you need help with? We're here to give it. And it's kind of as simple as that. So at the Ministry of Stories, during the day, teachers bring classes in, and there'll be 6 or 7 extra helpers for the kids. And evenings and weekends, there's some other kind of project going on. So we did a songwriting one, which with Communion Records, who are around the corner.
Sure.
They provided the artists, the kids provided the lyrics, and we made this really beautiful record with amazing music, because we want to show the kids that everything is writing. Everything they love is writing, whether it's hip hop or The Simpsons or whatever it is, somebody wrote it.
Right.
And that writing isn't poetry and essays, it's everything.
Sure.
So it's been kind of overwhelmingly popular, as you can imagine, with schools and with parents, because it's only good, right? There's no bad thing that can happen in this place, apart from you have a place to write and someone to talk about your writing too. We're not trying to create Booker Prize winning novelists. We're trying to lift grades, but if anything more than that comes out of it, then so be it. The other thing about these 826s in America and the Ministry of Stories, sorry, this is a long answer, but
No.
when Dave wanted to start it up in San Francisco, he found a building, and they went to the landlord, and the landlord said, well, yeah, you can use it, but zoning laws, it's a shop. It has to stay a shop, a store. And Dave said, sure, okay, let's keep it as a store. We're going to sell something. We're going to sell stuff you need to be a pirate. So in this store in San Francisco, out the front is this beautiful shop where you can buy glass eyes and tubs of lard and beautifully designed things. And then when the kids come in to have a look what's going on, bam, you nab them and take them around the back and make them write. Right. And everyone loved this so much that every 826 in America is a store out front and right. Writing center out the back. So in LA, it's a time travel store. And in DC, it's a Bigfoot store. And in New York, it's a superhero store. And we have, ours is called the Hoxton Street Monster Supply Company. And when you look at the outside, that's all it says. It just looks like a really weird shop that sells all the stuff that monsters need, like fear and courage. And
fantastic. I mean, maybe you say you're not trying to develop a Booker Prize winning novelist, but you certainly, trying to give a lifeline to these kids in terms of how writing is a companion in life and art is a companion in life. It's a thing that gets you through things. Yeah. right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The most, for me, the most important thing, I mean, it's art and love. Those are the things that are going to get you through, I think. And from the art point of view, I don't know about you when you were growing up, but I didn't come real close to another living writer.
Sure.
No one ever came to my school. I didn't know any musicians. I mean, I knew people who were learning the guitar, but the idea that kids from the inner city can wander in and meet someone who does this stuff for a living,
Sure.
I think that in itself is a huge thing. It's like you don't have to be, related to Prince Charles to be a writer. It's something that ordinary people get to do.
And I bet there's probably some amazing stories that come out of these kids' brains. I mean,
Yeah, and they've had pretty amazing lives, a lot of them. I mean, a lot of them are, maybe haven't been in the country that long, and there's all kinds of stuff that we couldn't possibly imagine that they've been through, and that goes in interesting creative directions, I think.
it's funny. It's like I have a friend who teaches writing on the university level, but also teaches at a women's prison, does this writing program at a women's
Wow.
prison. And she says that the work that comes out of the prison, is just fascinating and so rich and so deep, and kind of slays the master's degree program writing, right?
Yeah, because having something to write about is that's the hard stuff. The writing isn't as hard as the what you write about.
Now, you said something interesting to me when I hung out with you in London. Um, you said to me that in a way, you feel like the gate closed behind you, as in terms of becoming a professional, successful writer, and that the industry, the publishing industry, changed somewhat after you broke through.
Mm.
I feel like I missed the window in the music industry, in which there was a thriving industry for songwriters and bands.
Yeah.
And we've had to create other ways of making a living, and we have a lot of people that watch this show who are writers, musicians, artists. Speak to them for 1 second about this, because you have dedicated your life to writing and art, and it's a tough endeavor.
Yeah.
You're choosing a difficult path, and yet people do that. They decide to do that.
Yeah.
Speak to them for a second. What can they expect?
Well, if you're a writer, I think the first thing that to get to grips with is the idea that in the future, being a writer is going to be a writer in a lot of different mediums. I don't think that there's going to be a career as a novelist for many people. I think there was a time, maybe 70s, 80s, 90s, where you could bring out a book every couple of years, and if they could do okay, and the publishers would pay you for more. I think those days might be gone. I mean, partly it's the collapse of the independent retailer, certainly in the UK, who can make young writers by recommendations. Now everything's algorithms and so on and so forth. So that's tough. But set against that, there are all these amazing new platforms now. So if you can contemplate writing scripts or podcasts or whatever, just think outside the box, because there's definitely a living to be made in that. In some ways, it's quite an exciting time, but I don't think you can be stuck with the idea that I want to be this kind of writer. You have to be as flexible as you can possibly be. Yeah.
Sure. And as I always say, be in it for the marathon, not the sprint. Like,
yeah. I mean, it is scary. I mean, like for both of us, we know there comes a point. I always felt it was a bit like walking the plank. You must have felt the same. It's like, well, I can't go back there because I've burned all my bridges now. Yeah. So I'm just going to have to keep going. and hope for the best. But I really didn't want to be some pathetic 60-year-old who didn't have money for a pizza when his friends went out for dinner, you know.
Yeah.
So I was really scared about that. But there comes a point where your friends are starting to get good jobs and mortgages, and you think, well, I can't do that because I'm committed to this life. And that's the point where it's really hard to hold your nerve, I think.
Sure, and you would let a lot of people down if you stopped, because I don't know about you, but like there's a lot of people in your corner that help you get there.
Yeah.
And even just telling you you're good, keep going.
That's
People,
the most important thing, to find those people, I think.
sure.
You can find them professionally. It doesn't matter if they're in a position to do anything for you, but if you can impress some kind of professional person who knows what they're talking about, that's worth everything, I think.
Was there somebody in particular or a couple people early in your career that were those people? People that were established in the industry that picked up on what you were doing?
Only really quite late in the day. The first few years, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't meet anybody in the industry. I just used to send stuff off in brown envelopes and never see it again.
Hope.
I was kind of happy enough with that. It didn't make me nervous, you know. I didn't have to confront anyone telling me what was wrong with it. I never even heard from anyone telling me what was wrong with it. But my first editor was just an amazing champion, and she was fantastic. And she died very young, and that was such a shock to my system.
Mm. Wow, you know, it's like every year that I go through my career, I have a month out of that year where I have a flash where I think this is all going to be over tomorrow, you know. And I guess it could, but it's when you choose art as a career, it's always hard to feel the ground under you. Like, this shit is sturdy, you know?
Yeah, I mean, partly is there's no getting around the fact that anyone's opinion is subjective. So you never, ever know that you're better than everybody else or anybody else. You never know that. And that can change in the course of 10 minutes. I have a friend who's an artist, and we had kids at the same school. I said, "How was your day?" He said, "Oh, you know, genius, arsehole." And that's my day, you know, genius, arsehole, minute by minute. And there is never the sturdy fact that what you're doing is great. I wish I was a sprinter, you know. There's no such thing as a bad sprinter. You're as fast as everybody else, or you're not. But we all know musicians that we think are terrible, writers we think are terrible, who are making great livings. It's a crapshoot. So sure. You're always going to be on unsteady ground.
What really inspires me and gets me through those rough patches are, I look up to people like Bob Dylan put out an album this year, right?
Yeah.
79. And when I listened to some of the songs, I said, motherfucker's he's still digging deep, right? He's still trying to make his best song.
Absolutely, yeah. And it makes me laugh when you get to a certain age and people say, "Why do you do it? You don't need the money." And it's like, it doesn't work like that. That's who I am and what I do.
It's a calling, and it's Prince. I read this fantastic Prince book. I got to text you about this book. It's an oral history of the making of Purple Rain. And somebody asked.
It's a whole book.
Yeah, it's like 600 pages.
Oh, bring it on.
George, will you grab that Prince book right there? I want to show Nick. It's the most amazingly researched. That's okay. It's this. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, yeah.
And it's heavy. In fact, I'm buddies with the guy that wrote it, and he's about to have the second volume, which is the Sign of the Times oral, and it's like 600 pages. And he must have interviewed 400 people for this. And the thing I took away was like in 1983 and 1984, Prince, he produced 3 or 4 studio albums, a film. He produced many music videos. He produced 2 Sheila E. albums, a Vanity 6 album, The Family, about 10 albums worth of stuff in the can, and was touring arenas the entire time during that 2-year period. And somebody, you know, he didn't speak very much about how he did what he did, but he said, he used the phrase creative affliction. He said, you know, when you're laying down to go to sleep, I'm thinking about a new record and I can't sleep.
Yeah.
And he said, it's not necessarily always fun. It's an affliction.
I take sleeping pills every night of my life, and the kind I take cut the mind off from the rest of the body so that you can sleep. Because there's no difference between what you do during the day and what you're doing when you're trying to get to sleep. It's the same stuff going on all the time. It's not like you get to 6 o'clock and think, I've finished now, because you're going to think of stuff all the time. Have you been digging into the new Prince thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Fantastic. I mean, you know, he discarded better songs than most people put out, you know, as their best song.
I just can't believe it, how much stuff there was, how much he did, and like you say, he was touring as well. I mean, I am completely devoted to Prince, and the show I saw him 3 or 4 times, and I never saw any of these little club shows or anything like that.
Sure.
But there was a show he did between it was before Around the World, I don't know. It was a big funk review. Yeah. And they never stopped playing the entire 2 hours.
Sure.
One song went into the next. It was a horn section. It was 3 dancers.
Right.
It just blew my mind. And one of those shows where when I came out, it cemented the idea that I couldn't ever have a normal life, because that stuff meant so much to me.
Yeah, when you see a magician, you know,
like I'm not going to get a proper job.
The thing that absolutely that you would appreciate about this, that I didn't understand, is that Purple Rain came out and he toured that, you know, in the spring, and the film and the album were, you know, at the top of the charts that summer, right?
Yeah.
And Bruce Springsteen had Born in the USA, Madonna had Like a Virgin, and Prince had Purple Rain, and they were all doing the same arenas like a week apart, right? and I mean, what a summer. But
yeah,
Prince, by December, he had finished Around the World in a Day and forced his team and the record company to put it out in January. And they were begging him to wait at least a year, because Purple Rain was like the biggest thing in the world. And he was adamant that he needed to come out with something completely different as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then he toured Around the World in a Day, and he did not play a lot of the Purple Rain songs.
Yeah.
He wanted to let people know he wasn't just the Purple Rain guy, and he was going to be at the vanguard of creation at every stage.
I think what's interesting about that is it shows actually a certain degree of humility that you wouldn't expect from Prince, because I think the people who find it really hard to follow something up and take years and years and years about it are spending way too much time thinking about their own careers and their place in the world. and you just got to get on with the next thing. If you're in it for the long haul, then just get on with it. Don't get hung up on this thing that was a huge success. You're going to write something or make something that might not be a huge success, but you want to do this for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So just, you got to get over it. And, you know, it's the tragedy of Salinger that he never got over it.
There's a lot of writers who people say, oh, they had that one big book in them. But Salinger, Joseph Heller with Catch-22, I remember reading, somebody said he just really liked being the guy that wrote Catch-22. You know?
Yeah.
And just didn't want to like even take a chance that you would put something out that wouldn't be well received, right?
Well, even, you know, I wrote High Fidelity. I've written a couple of movies that have been nominated for Oscars. I've written a bunch of books. Every now and again, I read in a newspaper that I'm the football novelist.
Sure.
And I never wrote a novel about football. I wrote one memoir in 1992. And, you know, and it's like, you know, I survived it. I survived my football book. But even then, people want to stick you in that box and keep you there.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if you can talk about it, but there's been so many of your books that have been films and series, and you've written and adapted a number of fantastic screenplays. I love the High Fidelity series. I thought Zoe Kravitz.
It broke my heart that they canceled it. Yeah.
I don't get it, but I guess it says something about the landscape of television and film, but I thought she was just fantastic. And
that's been one of the great things that's happened in the last couple of years. One of the things I love about doing work in other fields, apart from my original field, is the chance to form relationships with amazing people. And I love Zoe, and I will do something with Zoe, I know, at some point in the future. And we text and send each other music. And, you know, who knew 2 years, 3 years ago that I would find some kind of kinship with someone like Zoe Kravitz. I wouldn't have known that, but she's my gal, you know, she's, I kind of get her, and I think she gets me, and you need to be pushed out there sometimes to know that these relationships can happen.
Sure. I hope you do something with her. And I really hope, this is what I was going to say, I hope that Just Like You could be a film, because I liked Juliet Naked a lot.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it could be made into a successful film. And I liked the film. I thought Ethan Hawke did a great job, and it was a fabulous job with the character. But this one, I think, is right on the money, like, for a screen adaptation. It touches on race. It touches on politics. It's got a lot of nuance. It's funny. It's light and breezy, and I feel like a lot of people could relate to it. So I hope it happens. Speaking of, my pal, what's next? What's next? What are you working on that you're able to tell us about?
Well, I am now able to tell you about this because it seemed to get announced, but I am trying to write 16 hours of drama about the Rolling Stones.
Woo, baby.
So, you know, it's like an FX show, and we start in 1963 and we go to 1974, and it's kind of an unbelievable job, but it's huge. And you know,
wow, Nick, that's great.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through the first season.
Do they need a middle-aged Jewish man who does a good Mick?
Yes,
of course.
Yeah, we need someone at the midpoint, you know, because we don't want to, rather than just cast someone who's too old to play young Mick or too young to play old Mick, if we just go for the middle and change him, you're the guy, I think.
Well, you know what's funny, Nick, is like we were just talking about people who are dedicated to the craft,
Yeah.
and people with creative affliction. The Stones. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, like it really drives me nuts that even now they still don't get their due as songwriters, you know? Because I put them up there with anybody
Yeah.
in terms of songwriting. But these guys changed the world. They changed the world. And then it's like they set about, certainly from the 1980s on, to preserve this thing that was really like a positive force in the world, the Rolling Stones. And they're gonna hit 65 years of the Stones.
Let's hope. Yeah.
Knock on wood.
60th anniversary in 2022. Yeah.
And 60th, right? And it's been so, like, I saw them on the last US tour.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And my expectations were low.
Yeah.
And I thought it was fantastic.
Well, I've seen them twice in my life. Once in 1975 and once in 2019. And I have to say the 2019 show was miles better.
Yeah, they got better. It's kind of like their range shrinks, but the spirit grows in a way.
Yeah, and I think that groove, you know, that never fails them now. So they've always got that. They know how to do that.
And I think they just love being the Rolling Stones, and that's the gig, you know.
One of the things that I find so moving is that Keith and Mick were at primary school together. You know, like they knew each other when they were 9, and they're nearly 80, and they've been through this, cataclysmic, lightning bolts, thunder, lightning striking them. I mean, between 63 and 74, when Ronnie joined the band, they locked in and they stayed there. And there's been some great songs since, but those first 10 years, no one could ever know what it was like to live that life, I think.
No. Nick, have you ever seen, before we go, it's a thing I'm so obsessed with. Have you ever watched the Tammy Show performance?
Oh, yeah. This is what I spend my life doing now, Adam. I start off thinking I need to write 10 pages, and 4 hours later, I go from one Tammy Show to the next, even if the Stones aren't on it, you know.
I interviewed Darlene Love on this show.
Oh, wow.
And Darlene sang backup for Marvin Gaye on the Tammy Show when James Brown and the Rolling Stones were headlining the show.
Yeah.
And we got into it. We talked about the fact that Darlene, like the black performers that were on that show, they had to put on makeup. It was a black and white broadcast. They had to put on makeup to lighten their skin. And they only had one shade of makeup. We talked about how that show was so, this little teeny bopper show for all these teenagers on a daytime broadcast was sort of like a really important moment for rock and roll, R&B, soul music, the visibility of black and white music and performers, and British and American. But I watched that Rolling Stones performance, and I love watching it because I can see that Mick was scared shitless after James Brown.
My screensaver on my iPad is a photo of Mick talking to James Brown, and it's backstage at the Tammy Show, and I've had to be talking to him recently about this series because it's with their permission, and I said, that's the screensaver, and I said, do you remember? He said, yeah, of course I remember. He said it was terrifying, and because there was no producer around, and he was sitting there fuming, and I had to go and tell him. He said, Oh, I was just telling them in the edit, you know, they'll probably do it the other way round. So let's just do it like this for now.
You know, there's a book. Have you read this James Brown book called The One? It came out about 5 years ago.
Yeah, who wrote that one?
It's
R.J. Smith.
R.J. Smith. It's there's a lot of James Brown books.
Yeah.
But this one is my favorite, and it really gets deep on the music.
Okay.
And
he's another one I get quite obsessed with.
Well, he talks in the book about how James was like, he wanted to go second to last.
Right.
Okay. And I learned from that, Nick. I have been in similar situations where we're on package broadcasts or package shows. And I don't want Low Cut Connie to be the top. This is some insider information right here. I want to be on the undercard. I want to be on the undercard, and I want to steal. And James knew that this was his moment to get white America to see him.
Right. Okay. Because they're going to have to sit through.
They're going to be waiting for the Rolling Stones and the Beach Boys. And James was just seriously on this mission because he hadn't truly crossed over to white audiences yet. Like he was like,
my thing about James Brown, I don't know if you agree with this, but I don't know if anyone else invented a genre.
He truly.
It's like one day there wasn't funk, and then he made a record and there was funk.
Yeah,
and I don't know if anyone did that.
He's I mean, he is a genre unto himself.
Yeah.
And you can date a James Brown performance based on the sound or the image.
Yes.
So of course you can look at it and you say, oh, he's got a mustache. It's got to be 1976.
Yeah.
Oh, he's got that green bodysuit. It's got to be the Payback tour.
Yeah.
But from the sound, you can date a James Brown record almost by the month, because from the beginning with the Famous Flames all the way through the 80s, he evolved and pushed the sound every month.
I think like It's Too Funky in Here is such a great record, and that was way on.
What I love about James, and it's funny because there's a lot of information in this book I didn't know about his role in civil rights. He was a conflicted icon of civil rights.
Yeah.
Okay. He was begrudging. Yeah. He was begrudging in his own stature, right? But like he had to be pushed to make Say It Loud. Okay. And he sort of like did it almost begrudgingly, and then he wrote one of the greatest, civil rights anthems.
Absolutely one of the greatest. Have you seen that documentary, The Night James Brown Saved Boston? Yeah,
absolutely.
There's no point telling you anything. You've seen it all.
Well, it's just but he was just such a hungry artist.
Yeah.
And it's such a case study in the psychology of art.
And it's all in that documentary, it all gets combined, really. Like it's he's doing stuff for the white mayor, but he's doing stuff to keep black people safe, but he wants to be paid for it. But it's like all those contradictions are in that one story. I wanted to write a movie about that, just that one night.
Oh, you should. I saw him in Philly, and I saw him in Philly in the late 90s with low expectations.
Yeah.
I had a ticket to see Southside Johnny in Asbury Park with the information that Bruce Springsteen was going to show up on stage. And then my friend said, you know what? James Brown is playing for free outside in Philly. And I'm so glad I made the choice to go see James in Philly. It was shortly after the Columbine shooting.
Right.
And he came out and he did this song, "Killing is out, school is in, come back tomorrow and try it again. Killing is out, school is in, come back tomorrow and try it again."
Wow.
And I was like, God damn, he's still trying to say some shit.
Yeah.
You know?
All these people like James Brown and Prince, you like Dickens, right?
What's that?
You like Dickens.
Sure, of course.
But like those guys, the only person I can think of in the literary world who had the same energy is Dickens. And I don't know if you've ever seen the collected letters of Charles Dickens.
I haven't.
Well, they're published in about 10 volumes, 10 big hardback volumes. If I'd written those letters, that would have been a life's work. Seriously. And just everything you read about him, that he's walking 30 miles a day through the night because he's thinking, and then he's writing 2 novels at once. He's doing the end of Oliver Twist while he's starting Bleak House because he's doing this part work stuff. And you think, I can't believe it. I cannot believe what he's doing. And I guess Prince is the nearest to that, actually.
It's funny. We think of these artists, these writers as, iconic figures, like statues, but they were working professionals, which I love. The piece, you wrote this book with the phrase "Shakespeare works for money."
Yeah, that was the title of one of the collections before they got collected. Shakespeare wrote for money. There's a really great book called 1599 about Shakespeare, and he wrote 4 plays in that year, 4 of the greatest plays in the English language, and it's a comedy, a tragedy, a history play. And it was to keep his theatre group going.
Sure.
He wasn't thinking that in the 21st century people will be talking about Shakespeare. It's like, I want this still going at the end of the year.
Well, listen, Nick, my pal, I wish you nothing but success with this one.
Thank you very much, Adam.
It was a breath of fresh air. And we have a lot of people watching this show who I think are going to go pick up this book just like you, the new novel by Nick Hornby. And I can't wait to find out more about this Rolling Stones project and all the things you got in the works. I hope that I get to see you in London next year.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I'll be there. If you build it, I will come.
Well, listen, take care of yourself. Say hi to your family.
I love talking to you. It's fantastic. It's a great show.
Thank you, pal. I will talk to you very soon. Mwah.
All right. Bye.